Good afternoon, everyone. Today we will be discussing population growth. What is population growth? Population growth. It is the change in a population over time and can be quantified as the change in the number of individuals of any species in a population using per unit time for measurement. Or simply say, population is the increase in the number of individuals in a population. In demographics, population growth rate is the rate at which the number of individuals in a population increases in a given time period as a fraction of the initial population. In other words, this is the average annual rate of change of population size during a specified period. The following are the determinants of population growth. Total fertility rate is the average number of children born to a woman of childbearing age, 15 to 44. Mortality rate is the number of deaths among group of population per a period of time. Birth rate is the number of babies born on each year per 1,000 inhabitants. Death rate is the number of deaths each year per 1,000 inhabitants. Both the fertility and death rate can be computed age-specific. The population growth rate is the difference between the birth rate and the death rate expressed per 1,000 habitats, divided by 10 to give percentage growth rate. The net migration rate is the difference between the number of persons entering and leaving a country per 1,000 inhabitants. The birth, death, and fertility rates depend on the age distribution defined as the percentage of the population belonging to different age groups. How many people live around the world today and where are they? The size of the world population over the last 12,000 years. The chart shows the increasing number of people living on our planet over the 12,000 years. Over the last 12,000 years. The world population today that is 1,860 times the size of what it was 12 millennia ago when the world population was around 4 billion. Year 1800s, the world population was only around 1 billion people. This implies that on average the population grew very slowly over this long time from 10,000 BCE to 1700s by 0.4% annually. The world population increased from 1 billion in 1800s to 7.7 billion today. The world population growth rate declined from 2.2 per year 50 years ago to 1.5% per year. According to recent estimates, today's population is about to 6.9% of the total number of people ever born. The chart shows the evolution of global population by regions. We can notice in the chart that Asia has the largest number of population. So, most of the people lived in Asia. Today, 60% shares in the population in Asia, while in the 200 years ago it was 68%. So it indicates that bumaba siya. The world region the world region saw that the fastest population growth over the last 2 centuries was North America, which grew on 31 folds, while second largest is Latin America, increases in 28 folds. Over the same period, the population of Europe increases 3 folds, in Africa 14 folds, and in Asia 6 folds. So what are the most populous country in the world? In the map, we see the estimated population of each country in 2019. Here we see that the top 5 populous countries are China with a population of 1.43 billion. Second, India with 1.37 billion, and USA as third, 329 million, Indonesia 270 million, and Brazil 211 million. Will humanity keep growing indefinitely? The world is more populated ever than before, but growth is slowing down. Human population, now nearing 8 billion, cannot continue to grow indefinitely. There are limits to the life-sustaining resources Earth can provide us. In other words, there is a carrying capacity for human life on our planet. Carrying capacity is the average population density or population size of a species below which its number tends to increase and above which its number tends to decrease because of shortage. Carrying capacity can be defined as a species' average population size in a particular habitat. The species population size is limited by environmental factors like adequate food, shelter, water, and mates. If these needs are not met, the population will decrease until the resources rebounds. In order to study how the world population changes over time, it is useful to consider the rate of change rather than focusing only on the total population level. This chart shows annual population growth rates superimposed over total world population for the period 1950 to 2050, plus UN projections up to 2100s. In 1962, annual population growth rates peaked, and since then they have been going down. The annual growth rate of the world population reached 2.2% in 1962. This may have been seen the first time in human history that the world's population grew at 2% per year. Since, as discussion later, 2% growth requires an unusual set of demographic conditions. The dip in the growth rate from 1959 to 1960 was due to sharp rise in the death rate and fall in fertility rate in China due to natural disaster and massive social change. There were many concerns about the potential impact of rapid population growth in the 1960s, including mass starvation in countries such as India, depletion of non-renewable resources, and increased poverty in low-income countries. According to these UN projections, growth rates are likely going to continue decreasing through the century. This means that while the world population quadrupled in the 20th century, it will not double in the 21st century. So the human population is not currently growing exponentially. Thus, the number of children in the world will soon stop increasing, and this will lead to new economic opportunities. The world is approaching what the late Hans Rosling called the age of peak child, the moment in global demographic history at which the number of children in the world stops increasing. The world has probably not reached peak child yet, but as the chart shows, we are likely very close to a long flat peak. The number of children in the world will not increase much more. Globally, this means there will be what is often called a demographic dividend. Demographic dividend, as defined by the United Nations Population Fund, is the economic growth potential that can result from shifts in a population's age structure, mainly when the share of the working age population 15 to 64 is larger than the non-working age share of the population 14 and younger and 65 and older. Also, it is a boost in economic productivity that occurs when there are growing numbers of people in the workforce relative to the number of dependents. And so, there will likely be an new economic opportunity because the proportion of people in working age will rise as the proportion of the dependent young generation falls. As UNFPA stated, a country with both increasing numbers of young people and declining fertility has the potential to reap a demographic dividend. How will global demographics change in the next decades? The chart shows the distribution of men and women across various age groups. This population pyramid rely on the data projections from the UN. The pyramid for 1950 looks like a pyramid. The base is wide and the top is narrow. This reflects the fact that there is a continuous risk death from birth on and through all ages. The pyramid in 2018 is wider at the top and narrower at the bottom. Because child mortality is falling, so the risk of death is now more concentrated at older ages. In 2100s, the pyramid will most like a box. There will be much less inequality in life expectancy. Most people will survive youngest, and deaths will tend to take place at an advanced age. So, what's the link between population growth and development? The link between population growth and development can be understood through a simple model called the demographic transition. Demographic transition is based on historical population trends of two demographic characteristics, birth rate and death rates, to suggest that a country's total population growth cycles through stages as that country develops economically, called the demographic transition. transition. Demographic transition is based on historical population trends of two demographic characteristics, birth rate and death rates, to suggest that a country's total population growth cycles through stages as that country develops economically. So the model of a demographic transition has 5 stages. Stage 1. There is high fertility and high mortality. So death and births cancel out. Stage 2. Population grows rapidly. There is high fertility but low mortality. Stage 3. Population grows slow down, or population growth slows down. Social norms adapt to the fact that children survive. Fertility decline with increasing education and labor opportunities for women. Stage 4. Population growth stops. Low fertility catches up with low mortality. Stage 5. Population potentially starts growing again. The evidence here is limited, but the idea is that further social and economic opportunities may rise fertility again. And this will lead us to Malthusian theory. Robert Malthus predicts that if population is not curtailed, then mankind will suffer from famine, disease, war, and poverty. Thomas Robert Malthus saw the transition from agriculture to industrial production and increases in wage, increases in living standards started increasing the population growth, while the decreasing number of labor and poor production of crops in agri-sector created a problem within food production. Thomas Robert Malthus argues that the population tends to grow geometrically, while food supply tends to grow arithmetically. If the population was not managed and slowed, it would outstrip the food supply. Then negative consequences will follow, such war, famine, and disease. And once the carrying capacity is reached, further will be prevented by checks. These checks can be positive or negative. Negative checks are the decrease in birth rate, while positive checks are the increase in death rate. So, the population is increasing while production of food is decreasing. With this, we put them together and will be a problem. And there will be a problem because the economy will not be able to support the growing population eventually. On here, we present a diagram for his idea on Malthusian trap. Consider the vertical axis, the growth rate of both income and population. Income being represented here by the solid line and the population with the broken lines. And the horizontal axis is given as our income per capita or our output produced within the year. During this period at period Y0, we can see that the solid line of the income has a higher growth rate than the broken line of the population. Because of this, then the economy is growing because there is less population but high in production. So, because of that, you can support your population, but as we move toward higher income brackets, moving to Y1 from the intersection at point A, you can see that the population now starts increasing, brought about by the increase of population production or increase in income and income. It also increases the capital stock and demand for labors and increasement of wages. So now the mortality rate decreases, birth rate increases, better living standard, education and health. So it gives us a population that is growing, and now it is surpassing the growth in income. And because of this, broken lines coming out and the income growth now is lesser in terms of the population growth rate. And Thomas says that it is problematic anywhere between Y1 and Y2. If you are able to go to point B, which point B here is what we called or consider the unstable equilibrium. Because at this point, it's either the economy can push toward point C or it will go back to point A. You can see the arrows, which is low level equilibrium. So, in the high population growth, household theory of fertility. The main idea is fertility in family is a decision taken at the microeconomic level by household. There is a rational income decision on demand for children. The demand for children in developing countries comes from two kinds of sources. The first has to do with the reason we usually think of for parents wanting to have more children. In this household new model, they thought of like a consumer good because it's something that brings happiness or satisfaction, and rather than something that's only happening now. It happens over time, over your life, and so they thought of it as an analogous to a consumer durable, which you have to pay something for but you have lasting benefits of enjoyment. First 2 or 3 children might be consumer goods and thought of this way, but additional children as investment goods, in the sense that the children are helping you to work on your farm or other jobs, working for micro enterprises. And the last is related to these investment goods idea is the old age security fertility motivation. In developing countries, least developed countries, and other low incomes, there is no social security program of some kind. So that if you're to be taken care in your old age, it will have to be your children. In order to see the relationship or further understand, we have here the demand for children equation. we have a function that tells us how many children the family will want to have. Of course, surviving children becomes a factor. The number of children you want in your family depend on a few things. One is the level of household income. And if you just think of the number of children as being the good question in question, as income rises, you want to have more children, and of course, this is related somehow to Malthusian model, and so it goes to get some. Going to get some. Um, families tend families spend more income on children when income rises. There is a positive relationship between incomes and the children, between the amount spent on children. However, the difference has to do with how much you spend on each child. This original theory referred as to the child quality versus child quantity. So that when you have the opportunity, you may prefer to have two highly educated children rather than 20 children who are not educated. PC is the net price of children. So, of course, it costs a lot to raise a child rather. In fact, in developing countries, it costs a fair amount, almost from the point of view of being a family, possibly living in poverty. The net price of children is where this investment good idea comes in. It costs less to raise a child if, on the other hand, the child is contributing to income by helping work on the farm. PX is price of all other goods. If the price of all other goods were to fall, that relative to the price of raising children, the family might be expected to substitute into other kinds of goods, like fan for the house or something, if those prices really fall in relative. TX or T is the taste for goods relative to children or the preferences. What are the people's underlying preferences for wanting to have a bigger family with numbers of children or quality of children, or versus other possibilities like travels? Under neoclassical condition, if we want to think about utility maximization, the higher the household income, the greater the demand for children. When families have opportunity to raise quality of children rather than quantity of children, they will tend to do so. The higher the net price of children, the lower the quantity demanded. The higher the price of all goods relative to children, the greater the quantity child demanded. The greater the strength of taste for goods relative to children, the fewer children demanded. So let us now proceed on the problems on population growth.
First, food shortage. If there are more people, more food supplies is needed. When there is food shortage, this means there is not enough food supply to sustain the needs of the people. Of course, as population grows, there will be an increase of consumption. So what will happen if there is a food shortage? there will be a panic buying. Because of having a limited stocks of food, a shortage of foods will occur. People making massive purchases in response to the food shortage, in which panic buying reduces supply and creates higher demand, leading to higher price inflation, which is bigger problem than RSS. Hoarding. Hoarding is acquiring an excessive number of items in stores than in chaotic matter. And lastly, of course, if there is a food shortage, prices of commodities also goes up. Water shortage. There is a water shortage due to an unequal distribution that causes by the growing population. For more people, naturally, more water is needed. In a place where the population is big, there is water problem. Third, housing problem. There are only a few families who own their houses and lots. At times, in crowded areas, people build their houses along the railroads, riverbanks, and even along sidewalks. These people are called informal settlers. An example for this is in squatter area. Because of the growing population, poor people cannot afford of acquiring their own house or lot. As a result, they tend to just fall into what we call squatter area. Unemployment. Too many people compete with one another for the limited jobs that are available. Unfortunately, the government cannot provide enough jobs for every job applicant. Many applicants end up underemployed working in jobs way below their educational qualifications and attainment. Peace and order. Due to big population, unemployment, hunger, homelessness, sickness, and frustrations, many people resort to illegal criminal acts just to survive. This leads to a rise in criminality that endangers the peace and security of the country. Sick. Health problems. First, malnutrition due to lack of food and nutrients. Unsanitary surroundings due to indiscriminate garbage disposal, poor hygiene and poor health, presence of disease like bronchitis among babies, diarrhea and tuberculosis. 7. Garbage problem. When there are many people producing garbage, we need more space of garbage. Rotting garbage just gives off poisonous gas called methane. This adds to air pollution. Heaps of garbage that easily decay are biodegradable, and those are non-biodegradable, like pieces of plastics or plastic bag. Plastic materials clogging in estuaries and canals contribute to flooding. 8. In crowded pollution. In crowded communities, many people are prone to polluted air, contaminated water, and noisy environment. As the population grows, more industries and factories are built. These give off harmful gases, chemicals like nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, and lead. Water is also polluted in crowded communities. And last, education. The rapid population growth results in the increase of children going to school, which causes the problem of quality education because of the crowds of students in school. Also, an increase of population students may affect school facilities and strain budgets. There are also solutions on population growth. First, better education. So, education leads to lower birth rate and slows population growth. Also, a more educated workforce also makes poverty eradication and economic development easier to achieve. Second is education for girls. Yes, education for girls because studies shows that women with access to reproductive health services find it easier to break out poverty, while those who work are more likely to use birth control. More educated women generally have fewer children, better general health, and higher infant survival rates. Third, making people aware of family planning. By simply educating men and women about the contraception can have a big impact. An example for this is those at UK charity Population Matters. They urge governments to promote responsible parenthood and say subsidies should be limited to the first two children unless the family is living in poverty. Fourth, tax benefits of concessions. This has been used to promote attendance of contraceptive education sessions, adoption and continuation of contraceptive methods, sterilization, and to limit family size. It is by helping people to get part of their money back in form of tax relief of various kinds. Fifth, knowledge of sex education. We all know that proper sex education can help curb the growing population. So lastly, social marketing. Social marketing is family planning programs. In family planning programs, makes contraceptive products accessible and affordable while using commercial marketing techniques. Social marketing programs can be designed to reach the poor if product prices are subsidized sufficiently.